back to the Body Pod, everyone. Today we have Doc Jen Fit, as she's known on Instagram here, Dr. Jen Fraboni, who is a doctor of physical therapy. She's the creator of At Jen Health and the podcast co-host of the Optimal Body podcast, which Laura and I just did a deep dive in. So we are like hooked and just going through all of the episodes. So welcome, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We are so excited to get all of this information from you because I feel like I'm a strength coach. And so the mobility issue, I mean, that's most of my questions is I'm just like, I only coach women over 35. Our podcast is pretty much women over 35. And so everyone is kind of having the same issues, but we'll get there. First, can you just give us a little background information about how you got into this massive empire on social media and kind of what started your process through beginning the podcast and, doing what you do now?
Oh man, I mean, social media for me was kind of an accident. I didn't intend to have a huge following, have a business at all. It was while I was still in physical therapy school that I started to connect with the calisthenic community and then the acro yoga community. And at the time, I was one of the only women who was really showing up at Venice Beach with the calisthenic community and really, doing our calisthenic workouts on the bars. So he started posting me and all of a sudden I'm getting followers. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess I just do like handstands and cool stuff now. And so it became like a cool side hobby on the side of getting my doctorate of physical therapy. But then once I graduated, I wanted people to know that I knew a little bit more about the body than just what I could do with my body.
Mm-hmm.
So I changed my name to Doc Jen Fit. At the time, it was Jen_ES_care because that's how you phonetically say my name, which is not a good handle for someone who actually wants to build a following, right? Because that was like, it was intended for friends and family. It wasn't intended to like do anything.
Yeah.
And so I changed it to Doc Jen Fit and I started educating, and that blew up way more than just doing like some of my cool calisthenic stuff. I was like, wow, okay. So people want this information. And it was funny because I would post, if I would go through like a series a week. Okay, we're going to focus on plantar fasciitis. I'll do some mobility for it. And then we'll go into some strengthening, some stability, some skill, and then some, a little bit higher level exercise. But the only thing people really cared about was the mobility aspect. Every time I posted about mobility, those were the videos that really blew up. And so when it came time to where I was just like, I had been doing this for 2 years and I'm like, okay, who's actually seeing my videos? Who is it even helping people? Algorithms keep changing. So what if I launched a program where I put, all the stuff into one place? And at the time of launching, that's where I was like, I know it's going to be mobility. I know that's what people want from me. But I asked, I polled, I did surveys, I did lives, I did so many, questions to really get to know and make sure what I was believing to be true was what people were really wanting. And that's kind of how I became known as like a mobility person, is because it's really what people wanted from me. Not necessarily the only thing I want to provide people, but it was really what people were asking more of me. And so when I launched, my first thing, that was what I put out there. And it's only, so that was the mobility method at the time, just a one-off program. And then I launched into a membership site. And then my husband came in 2020, also a doctor of physical therapy, blew up the business with me, and we started a podcast. We started our own app and platform and transferred everything to Jen Health, so that it's just like, oh, I'm in pain, I need to do Jen, not necessarily like me as a person, but the thing, Jen, that I know can help my body. And so that's kind of where it has transferred throughout the years. And it's been quite a journey to be able to watch it grow and transform and go from being in a clinic to doing what I'm doing, helping thousands of women online. But it's been amazing.
So Yeah, I mean, I'm, like, so blown away. I mean, I just started a couple of years ago, and so it's like the wild, wild west on social media, and so you're, like, high one day, and then you're not, and then nobody's paying attention, and then, you know, trying to stick through it until you get people to really know, like, and trust you is, like, a totally different game. And now I feel like it takes even longer because it's so saturated since 2020, which is when I initially jumped in as well. But do you only work with females or do you have male
You know, I
clients?
we have everyone. Majority, I will say, is females
Yeah.
because I've shown my evolution. I've also been very vulnerable to show a breakup that I went through. That was a huge thing, and me processing going through cheating and infidelity and what that looked like for me. So obviously, I just connected to a lot of women. I shared when I
Mhm.
had a miscarriage. I connected to a lot of women. So because I've been vulnerable in my own personal experiences, I've naturally just connected more with the female community. But I do
Mhm.
have anyone trying my programs. I have testimonials from guys too, but I get some men who reach out and be like, "Is this for men too?" Like, yes, it can help
Yeah.
everyone, but majority of people who join, and I feel like women are more in that community aspect of things, that where
Mhm.
they feel comfortable to show up and talk about what's going on in their body and ask questions. So majority of people who end up within our
I can
community
see
are
that.
women.
That's great. Does your husband still work like clinically or is he kind of taking on like you're both running the show here?
We're both running the show here, which is pretty wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in 2020, is he had just moved out to California in 2019, and so he really started building up his own practice.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, and
Mhm.
so that all left, and he was like, what, and things started to blow up online, obviously. So he was like, how can I help? Where can I step in? And he's really more business minded, I would say, than I
Mhm.
am. So he's been able to step into the back end and organize everything I was never going to organize, bring
So
on
good.
Funny.
people,
Yeah.
bring on people, like, I mean, just everything within the back end of business that he's really been able to
Did you
help
always
it
want
grow.
to be a physical therapist?
So
Like, what got you into that initially?
So
mhm.
I just was always fascinated with the body. I was a gymnast and then I coached gymnastics after that. And I always remember, kind of thinking, "Oh, all right, I can tape an ankle. I can, help someone through a skill, but why am I taping an ankle? And is this really helping?" And then I started teaching Pilates as well. And the questions kept, I just wanted to know more. Yeah, I can modify around pain. Yeah, I can make sure that their knee pain isn't going to hurt during this exercise, but why do they have knee pain and what's going on?
Mhm.
And naturally the subjects I kind of liked in school had to do around anatomy and physiology. So I just knew that I was going to go into
Mhm.
kinesiology. I didn't really know the path after that. And then I was just like, well, physical therapy makes most sense. I kind of interned and did some aids jobs in that area and was like, yeah, I'm really just fascinated about the body and continuing to want to know why. And that's always going to be the search. I'm never
Yeah.
going to have the answers. It's always going to
Yeah.
be, well, what else?
Oh, so great. Well, if we're looking specifically at, like I mentioned earlier, the women over 35 category, I feel like just from working with this age group, there's always kind of the same issues. I mean, more or less. There's 70% of women, have XYZ
Mm-hmm.
kind of that goes wrong with them. And the mobility aspect is I have just been coaching people one on one in person, but then also just
Mhm.
being at a gym all the time and seeing the movement patterns. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so needed, but people don't know that they're even doing it wrong until they get injured or until something starts chatting with them. So, what do you see as like the common issues that someone in the second half of life is kind of coming into you or asking on your platform about?
I think especially with women, we're
Mhm.
expected to take on a lot. And nowadays, especially, right, we're the CEO, we're running the jobs, we're excelling in jobs, we're getting promoted.
Mhm.
Yet we're also still having the babies and running the household. And babies, just usually kids gravitate toward mothers more. So
Mhm.
you're taking on a lot emotionally there on top of whatever else you're doing outside of the household now. And so what I tended to see when I was in practice with people one-on-one, and still now, is, I would get the laundry list of things starting to like, well, and then I have this, and then I have this, and then I don't have time for this pain because I have this and this. And when they're starting to talk already, you see
Yeah.
how elevated their body is getting.
Mhm.
Where would mobility even come into play here? We're so stressed out and we're running at such a high level that, of course, your body is going to be tense. Even if you did foam rolling, even if you
Mhm.
did massages weekly, your body is holding so much tension, which is going to impact the way you're moving and how your form looks when you're doing lifts, which can impact how you're feeling. But also, we know in general that if you're running at a higher level of stress, you're more likely to have more pain and tension within the body as well.
Mhm.
So I think it's hard to say, like, oh, just do these mobility exercises or do this little stuff. Like, we got to get on top of where your mind is running
Mhm.
because it's that constant stress that's going to keep your body
That's one
constantly
thing I
tense,
love
tight,
that
and
you
in pain.
said in one
Yeah.
of your YouTube videos that I watched. You said if you don't change your environment of stress, you aren't going to change the feedback to your body. And I just thought that was so powerful and so,
Mhm.
so true.
Yeah.
It's the number one thing we're kind of missing. And when I'm working with people, either through my programs or in challenges or in person, most of what we're doing, we're working through the mental patterns of what you're telling your body it's capable of and
Mhm.
the messages of pain that you're perceiving. Because this becomes very, very important in your ability to then heal. If you don't believe it's possible, if you believe you're broken, if you believe that, so many aspects of what we believe go into how we're going to how well treatment is going to do. No matter what exercise, no matter what expert you're with, it all depends on what we believe about this to be true. And so I have to kind of sneak those in because this isn't the
Mhm.
sexy stuff I can put on social
Mhm.
media of like the mobility moves that you need to be doing, but it's the most important stuff that is underlying. And one of the ways I first sneak it in is just with breath in my programs. Like if you're doing a low back plan, you're starting with breath. And I really hope people do not
Yeah.
skip day one
Yes.
of the breath because it is the key to unlocking how we're then going to keep moving through the plan.
Yeah, we interviewed one of the main strength and conditioning coaches for all of I'm in Boulder, uh, for all of the like Ironman and pro athletes in Boulder. And she was like the foot and the breath are the two pieces that people should do, but it's not nobody wants to do it. Everyone wants to be like, that's not going to do anything. That's not going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And the high stress is really hard too, because you can't just be like, well, you know, how let's work on getting de-stressed. Or it's like when I tell women how important sleep is for fat loss, and they're just like, get it, but like, can't sleep.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to, I'm in menopause, and these are all these symptoms that come, and it's frustrating for all of the women out there because they're just like you said, taking
Mhm.
on so much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like we're delegating, like if the child wants you, the child wants you. It's hard to delegate and be like, sorry, you're getting your dad or you're getting a babysitter. I mean, sometimes, yes, you have to, but
Yeah.
we're not letting go of anything. We're just taking more stuff on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm,
And that's where it becomes toughest. So how do we then, how do you manage it? Right. I think the number one thing on people's plate is how do you manage stress?
yeah.
And it's not trying to add more on, but
Mhm.
within what you do, how do we reframe it? How do we add tiny little quick habits that are going to change, your stress levels in that moment? So how can, and that's that's what I'm all about. Like, how can we add little tiny things? I'm not saying you got
Right.
to do an hour of meditation every day,
Mhm.
Like, how do we get sunlight in our eyes before our phone light? How do we brush our teeth and, just think about something positive for the day? Or like, how do we start to reframe what I'm feeling in my body and what my body's able to do, rather than all the things that it's feeling it's not able to do in that moment? So how do we reframe
Yes.
from what I can do, rather than what I can't do? And it's these little things that can really have a
I
huge
love that
impact in
so
the long
much.
run.
It's just the whole
Oh,
mind body connection. I feel like I need to start my workouts with breath work now, even if it's for like 30 seconds. When you said that, I was like, I find myself
yes.
running to the gym because I'm trying to squeeze it in because I have a newborn. And
Yeah.
I,
Mhm.
I need to actually probably sit there for 30 seconds and do breath work, even 30, 60 seconds. And just as you said that earlier, I felt my body calm, like that is what I need to do before I start working out.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys know he's a huge YouTuber, Thomas DeLauer? I don't
Yes.
know. Yes.
Mhm. Mm.
So I worked with him before, and his takeaway
Mm.
from our session was the breath. He was like, "Oh my gosh, when you got me to breathe differently, that unlocked something that I've never paid attention to before." So it wasn't mobility, it wasn't hands-on work that I
Wow.
did on him,
Mhm.
it was the breath that
Wow.
he then has taken in. So it was when people really start to feel it and understand it in a different way, I think, because we're always breathing. So what does
Yeah.
that really mean, right? But it's being more intentional on how to turn on that parasympathetic system. And like you said, in 30 seconds, that could really make such a huge difference in then how we move and feel.
Okay, so I'm guessing that this can all be found on your platform, like breath exercises and all
Yeah.
of that.
But we can go over some
I
quick
would love
tips that
that.
I recommend.
Yeah, let's do.
I mean, in general, when someone says to take a deep breath, the number one thing that people typically do is breathe into their shoulders, raise their shoulders and their chest up to their ears, focus on a big inhale, and then let go of the exhale, right? And I like
Mhm.
to reverse that. When someone scares you, we tend to lock up into our chest and our shoulders rise into our ears. That's our sympathetic nervous system. That's where we're already probably living. So
Yeah.
let's not do a big, huge inhale into our chest and raise our shoulders up to our ears. Let's actually, I like to use the hands just around the low rib cage. And if you squeeze the low rib cage just a little bit and then take a nice big inhale through your nose, just into the sides of the rib cage, trying not to get your neck, trying not to let your shoulders rise, but allow that belly to relax. It's not pushing out, it's just relaxing, but you're pushing into the sides of that rib cage and then slowly exhaling even longer than your inhale. And if you just do a few of those, a longer exhale than an inhale, think of, I'm going to get a massage. What do I think when I lay on a table? It's like, it's that exhale.
Mm.
That exhale is what helps to turn on that parasympathetic system. So if we could do that, you do that before you're getting out of the car and into that busy household. You're doing that, when you're sitting at your desk and you've been intensely working for a while. How can I just put my hands on my rib cage and take a couple breaths for a second? When can I be in my car and at a red light and take a breath? Like, where can I start to just sprinkle that in, where I'm reminding my body how I don't need to be into my neck and my shoulders all the
Mhm.
time, especially as a new mom.
Yeah.
And I can drop down into my lower rib cage where my diaphragm rests, so that things can start to work a little bit more.
I just had Joseph Pilates run in my head. I'm a Pilates instructor instructor too. I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
breath is the foundation," but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so easy to miss, and
Yeah.
I mean, especially nowadays. That's amazing. So, do most women like what's one of your most popular, I don't know, programs, plans, episodes on your like is it low back? Is it, knee? What would it be?
Honestly, HIP has actually been a really popular plan on the platform, which is interesting. But The thing about our platform too is that if you do the hip
Yeah.
plan, you're not just getting hip stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You do the low back plan, you're going to get hip, upper back, breath, knee, foot. Like you're going to get kind of everything, because when you start to learn that it all plays a role within the body, and what you do can really, what you do around the area can have a huge impact on what you feel within your symptoms. You really start to notice something different. And one of our challenges that we just did, we actually added strength training with mobility and a little bit of some power work, and getting women who've usually been in a lot of pain
Mm-hmm.
to feel more confident under a barbell or under heavier dumbbells was really cool, because we used that mobility aspect with the breath. So, and that's where I also like to say, okay, how can I add breath into what I'm already going to do? So if I'm going to do a
Mm-hmm.
warm up and it's going to include a little bit of active mobility, how can I use some of these inhales and exhales through my low rib cage to really start to expand and open up, so I prepare my body a little bit better for the workout. So I'm not having to do it separate, but I'm doing it in conjunction of what I'm already going to do.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I think what we often miss of a workout is just that quick recovery. And that cool down really is just helping to get that body back into that parasympathetic, because a workout is more of a sympathetically driven place, which is good. We need that for the
Mm-hmm.
body, but then we need to teach the body how to calm down afterwards. And that's where recovery happens. So if you can take 5 minutes and plop your feet up onto, on a higher surface, lay on your back, get into that deep breath, or bring your legs up a wall straight, so you're kind of stretching the hamstrings at the same time you're down regulating the body. Do that a few times. It doesn't have to be a fancy cool down, but even just that is going to help reset your body from what you just kind of were in that higher state into that lower state, so that you're helping your body better recover, and so that you can work out the next day. And I think that's so key for people to start to, how do I start to take care of my body a little bit
Mm-hmm.
better so that I can feel more confident moving? And that's the coolest thing, is when, and which I'm sure you see all the time,
Yeah.
is helping women gain confidence in movement.
Mm-hmm. And isn't it usually like the area that's hurting, that's bothering them, you usually look at like the joint above or the joint below, because it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the actual area that's bothering them.
Yeah. So there was a quote from Ida
Yeah.
Ralph, who, if you know Rolfing, it's like
Mhm.
a really
Yes.
intense massage technique. But they do full body massages for any area of the body, right? So it's specific to different parts of the body, but you're really looking head to toe, because her line was, where you think it is, it ain't.
Yeah.
Meaning, just because it's my low back that's hurting doesn't mean that it's my low back that needs to be focused. Something around the area is causing my low back to take on a little bit more tension. So how can I
Mhm.
reduce tension from that area by first opening up the hips, opening up the upper back, reducing any increased tension that low back is taking on, and then load the core, which includes the low back? How do I then increase, that load of the spine to teach my body it's safe to bend, it's safe to hold load, it's safe to, be used? And I think that's where kind of it gets lost sometimes in physical therapy.
Mhm.
Just because I want to take tension off of an area and work above and below doesn't mean that I need to avoid that area, like the
Yeah.
knee. Eventually, yes, I want to open up the hips, I want to open up the ankles, but I need to also load and put tension on that knee, or else it's
Mhm.
never going to be able to take on that load. And I'm going to keep doing stairs, I'm going to keep bending low, and I'm going to keep getting pain if I don't progressively add that load back in. So I think having less fear around is slowly increasing our ability and our awareness to feel resilient in the body in that area is
Mhm.
so incredibly important. The spine can bend, the spine can hold load, the spine, when there's actually studies that we show, no matter how much neutral spine you try to hold when you're doing a deadlift or a squat, your spine is going to flex.
Yes.
Like it is. We cannot stay in the same upright low back position when we bend over. There is going to be some movement. So how do we teach the body to be strong under that movement? And that's
Mhm.
where it's just increasing our movement capacities, increasing where we're moving from, increasing that load is just, it's all so incredibly important so that we learn to trust our
Yeah.
body in movement again rather than fearing movement, because the worst thing that you can do is fear ever bending over or squatting down or something that we need in
So
everyday life.
true.
Mhm.
It I feel like women our age, a lot of people do complain of lower back pain. I have lower back pain all the time too, but I also have extremely tight hamstrings. And one of your videos, I was laughing because I'm like, no, I think I was just born with tight hamstrings. They've been tight my whole life. It's probably from all the running I've done for 100 years. But I was like, I've always had tight hamstrings. And you were like, you haven't always had tight hamstrings. I'm like, did she hear me say that? It was so funny. I'm like, she's right though. So I do need to like, yeah.
I mean, we see how a baby comes out and how mobile they are. You know, it's like someone who tells me, I've always had bunions. I've had bunions my whole life. And I'm like, when you were born, do you think you had bunions? Do you think that your toes stuck out like that? Probably not. It's probably been developed over time. So, and we can't reverse a bunion, but we can work to decrease the, or, you know, the way that it's going to keep progressing, because a bunion just keeps progressing if we don't do anything about it. So
Mhm.
how do we catch it now to help prevent that and prevent pain?
Well, I think it's interesting, Laura, that you just said you had hamstring because Laura and I both have
Yeah.
had major knee surgery. Mine was in 2019,
Mine was in
and
2022.
Laura's yours was 2 years
I
ago,
think 2022.
2022.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was January 2022. Anyhow, and I didn't know you had like I had so much PRP and,
Hmm.
every kind of treatment that you could do on a hamstring, I had done, and then come to find out it was my knee that eventually gave out and had issues that required surgery. But it's just like it's so hard, especially for endurance athletes, which we both have been. It's hard because you're doing so much volume of training that the
Hmm.
mobility is like, I don't have time to stretch. I have a babysitter for 2 hours. I got to go on a 2 hour
I
run.
know.
Like, I don't know
Right.
what to tell you. Like, and that always gets missed, like the breath. And then these seemingly not as important steps
Right.
is what takes everyone out when, I mean, I don't know a single Ironman, you know, athlete in my age that's a female that is
Yeah.
not like, well, I'm
Yeah.
out for the season at some point. It's just like it all happens because we're just trying to squeeze in the what we perceive as the important workouts and then miss that whole piece.
Which it is important, you know, you can't downplay that.
Yeah.
That is the most important thing to the training in order to be able to do it. But then we have to support it. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, how can I just add 2 minutes, not even like
Mhm.
5 minutes of a warm up, but like what are those 2 minutes that will help prep my body to feel a little bit better and more prepared? Or what are
Yeah.
those 2 minutes afterwards that I could do? And it's if we could just reframe. I know it's hard, and that's why sometimes working
Uh-huh.
with someone is going to be best, right? Because
Yeah.
they're going to force you to do the workout and with the warm up and the cool down. They're not going to allow you to just jump right in because they want to make sure that you're prepping your body best. And that's why sometimes it's better to have a coach and have someone really guiding you through in
Mhm.
order to not miss these things. And a lot of times, you know, it's like these chronic places where we're tight, like the hamstrings.
Mhm.
It's the things that sometimes help most is, yeah, we want to take some time to stretch consistently. A little bit or every day is going to be such a bigger difference than, you know, doing 10 minutes or an hour a day. But if we just did little bits, but also added in that strength component where I'm going to go really slow on my RDLs and get that eccentric stretch with that load,
Mhm.
sometimes that added load and going slow into that deadlift type position, but with a little bit more of straighter legs is going to help to increase that flexibility as well. So we sometimes miss that load is mobility and
Mhm.
actively being able to move your body in different ways rather than just passively stretching. Passive stretching, I would say, is such a low item on the mobility
Yeah.
importance, because passive stretching has to be done so much so consistently to make a real change. But if we could just add in active components in our warm up and during our workout, it would
Mhm.
make a much greater
That's
change
such a good
in
point.
how we overall feel.
Do you feel like have you ever met anyone, again, over 35, that that like isn't there are, of course, people that don't require a lot of mobility because they're mobile already, but they usually are doing something to keep the mobility. But for an
Yes.
average person, have you ever just had somebody walk in and you're like, your mobility is amazing? Or do we all like have things as we get to these later years that are just like require mobility work for everyone?
I mean, we all have things. Even if you're hypermobile, a lot of the times you might feel more tension and more tightness within your body because your body is preventing you from having too much mobility. So it's
Mm,
always kind of grabbing on and you always feel tense and tight. That's what a lot of hypermobile people complain about. Like, I'm hypermobile, but why do I feel so stiff and tight? Well,
mhm.
because your body is trying to protect you from overdoing it within your joints. So how do we start to train our body how to move within our fuller range of what you would have available as a hypermobile person, so
Mhm.
that you feel more controlled and safer within those ranges and less tension outside of that, where your body's feeling like it has to grip and hold all the time. So for a lot of
Ah,
people, active mobility under load is so important. And this is where, I'm not just going to do push-ups, but I'm going to do push-ups in their full range. I'm going to really focus on the end range and how I go into a movement, how I come out of a movement. I'm going to slow things down. I think a lot of times
Yeah.
too, women are just trying to get it done.
mhm.
Right? I'm just trying to get through my workout as fast as possible. Because I need to get back and do whatever I need, XYZ. So a lot of times we're rushing through it without any intention on what the body's actually supposed to be doing. And that's where the mobility comes from. If am doing a chest press, how can I open up my chest and slowly expand things and then press up? That's where I get the mobility with the strength training. And
Mm.
that's where my body's really going to start to feel better and less tense all the
I feel
time.
like I need to be
Yeah.
stretching and doing these workouts
Yeah.
right this second. Like,
Oh, we're gonna start we're getting it. That's the hardest part too. I mean, I don't know if you noticed this in Pilates, but when I would teach Pilates, I taught at multiple studios, and so it wasn't like there's classical, and
yeah.
then as you know,
Yeah,
there's everything else.
a lot.
And so we would do like mixed TRX classes or whatever it may be. I can count on one hand the number of women that could do a proper push-up.
Hmm.
And same thing with a squat or a hinging movement, because we're just kind of used to going into these half ranges when we would get more out of it if we did a different version with that full range, because once we lose that full range, it's hard to get back if we're not going in those full ranges, right?
100%. And I think we've also kind of been, and Pilates kind of did this as well. At least for me, it was always knee over the ankle, knee over the ankle.
Yes.
Never let the knee pass the toe, right? When you're bending and you're doing lunges and stuff. That's one way, but that's not the
Yeah.
only way. And we
Hmm.
need that ankle mobility to keep the knee healthy. So, unlearning that, unlearning
Yeah.
some of the things we've learned, like how often in squats have we been told growing up, you need to sit back into your hips and
Oh,
so that your toes can come off the ground,
yep.
right? Well, no, we need our feet. We need our feet grounded. We need our toes down so that our knees can come forward and we get fuller depth. So we've cut off, because of these cues that have been used for so long, we've cut off people's range of motion. And
Yeah.
so now they don't know how to squat into a full range. I work out with my mom a lot. She's 71, and it's tough to get her comfortable. She will do yoga and go into a full squat, and then I
Hmm.
give her a dumbbell and she's in a half little squat, and I'm like,
Yeah.
mom, trying to get her motivated and understand how her body can support her a little bit more, but it takes
Hmm.
time. So working with people is fine, to get them in those half ranges, and then slowly over time, how do we lower that depth, lower that depth, lower that depth, and help you feel a little bit more confident in it? Because like you
Yeah.
said, it's exactly like you said, if we don't use it, we lose it. And that's
Yeah.
why a lot of people who aren't hanging, who aren't doing pull-ups, we lose that overhead range of motion. All of a sudden our
Mhm.
shoulders sound all cracky and have a lot going on because we're missing that aspect. If you're doing yoga all the time, well, how are you pulling? How are you using your body to really gain that strength in pulling? So it's all about balancing the body. You can grab any form of exercise you love, but make sure that you also are dabbling in other things. You're adding some resistance. And, I think Pilates does a great job of kind of like having more well-rounded ability depending on where
Mhm.
you go or who you go to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pulling, there's a lot of resistance that you can add on, but we have to make sure that we're challenging our body in different ways, or else we're going to be stuck.
Yeah. And this is the biggest thing that I've seen in the last few years, just as I have been working with this age group, is like the message is definitely loud and clear that women need to strength train. And, there's still intimidation around the gym. There's still, fear of getting injured, rightfully
Mhm.
so, because we get injured in our 40s and 50s, especially after we lose estrogen. It's a hard battle. They last twice as long as they would, if we were 20 something.
Yeah.
But the gym is so, like, for multitude of reasons, it's so good to go. But I encourage women to go mainly because I'm like, I mean, 8 out of 10 women, if not more, that I see will have limited ankle range of motion.
Oh
And so
yes.
then the squat is not great, and then the low back takes it,
Hmm.
and the pieces at the gym, like the pendulum squat or the hack squat, allow them to get down into a range they cannot get vertically, and so they're getting that, and they'll be sore, and they'll be like, "I was so sore." I'm like, "'Cause you've gotten into this range that you haven't been able to get into,"
Hmm.
which is another reason of, just kind of trying to get women to go to the gym just for different issues like this. Obviously, work on the mobility, number 1, but not everyone knows what to do. It's like
Totally.
any profession that we have. Laura's in the beauty profession. I'm doing strength training. You're doing all of it. Um, People will have things that they're comfortable with, and then things that they're not comfortable with. And it's either like, well, I don't know what to do at the gym, so I'm just not going to go because I don't know what to do for strength training, or I'm not going to do mobility because I don't even know
Yeah.
where to start. Where do I start?
Hmm.
So I'm assuming you have, good programs that, like, here's where you begin for this issue.
Yeah, I mean, within Gen Health, we have 11 different plans. So whether it's body part specific or just core focused or full body mobility or whatever you kind of want to step into, my intention with these programs, especially if you're doing like knee, low back, is not to take you away from your everyday workouts and what you love doing. I want
Mhm.
you to keep doing that. This is going to be 5 to 10 minutes of how you start to sprinkle in mobility and stability
Yeah.
exercises you're likely missing anywhere within your day. Like I say, if you one video in the morning, one video at night, there's 1 to 2 videos a day usually. And again, they're 3 to 8 minutes long. So it's quick. It's something that I hope is the most is attainable. It keeps track of your progress. And then once you get done with the first 30 days, there's another 30 days. Okay, here's how you can progress with the low back. Here's how you can progress. So I want to keep people, give them something accessible, easy, and quick to do so that
Mhm.
it doesn't distract from what they already are doing or loving or whatever app or coach or who they're working with. I don't want to
Mhm.
take away from that. I want you to do what you love because that helps with pain. I
Yeah.
just want you to step in and add these little bits to sprinkle in, because once you start to notice how where you're limited, and you'll learn about your body. I fully instruct in each of these videos. It's not like a just here are the movements to do, because I
Mhm.
want you to understand, okay, here's how I can modify, here's how I can progress, here's what my body needs, here's why this has been happening with my body. And I want you to start to understand your body in a whole new way. Like that's really my goal. I want you to understand where your low back could be, where the pain could have been coming from, and what you can really do about it.
Can you just go over the definitions? Because I know, this is probably something that some women want to ask, but feel like it's too elementary. But I mean, I've been asked it a bunch of times, so I know that other people have. The difference between mobility, stability, and just stretching.
Yeah. So when it comes to stretching, we're usually talking about passive stretching. And that's just, I'm going to use a strap and pull my leg up, whatever, or someone else is going to push my leg forward. So whatever is done onto your body that you're completely relaxed and you can just kind of sit into it. That's passive stretching. That plays a role mostly if you have a lot of guarding and a lot of tension. I would say hold it for at least a minute. Use really good that breath work that we were doing before, because if you're fighting a stretch, you're getting no benefit out of it. If you're holding your breath, if you might as well not be doing it. So really using that breath work to help the body to relax tension. If you know that you have a range of motion that you're neglecting, that's where passive range of motion becomes crucial to like start to add in. Mobility is really making it a little bit more active. So instead of just doing a hamstring stretch, I'm going to go into a hamstring stretch, but maybe I press my heel down into the floor, or I'm going to put my I'm going to be in a half kneeling position, put my foot onto like a towel and slide out and slide back in. So now I'm using my hamstring as it increases its length, but it's actively doing that. So it challenges my body a little bit more in that active range and in that full range. So how do I, whether this is active rotation of my upper back, or this is where an RDL comes into play. Like, how do I, with straighter legs, go into a deadlift position to what I can tolerate and then come back up? That's putting a stretch and load into those hamstrings and then coming up. So that's mobility. When we're talking about stability type exercises, we're talking about typically more like isometric type exercises. How do I start to feel those tiny little muscles work again that I'm not as aware of? Some that are, very obvious in terms of PT is like directing from my hamstrings from my glutes, or my glutes from my hamstrings. So how can I tap into a different type of position where I feel more hamstrings, or where I feel more glutes, or where I feel more quads? So how do I kind of begin to distinguish those within my body so that I feel different things that might need more attention than others? For the shoulders, it might be I'm working a little bit more on that serratus anterior, the place that gets my shoulder blades to kind of glide up so I can move my shoulder overhead better, something that's often neglected. So it's using more of those little stabilizing muscles that we start to tap into. And that's usually more of like the stability exercises. But in general, we can also go broader. Stability can be synonymous with strength. So any kind of strength exercise you're doing could be a stability exercise. Any kind of mobility exercise that also adds strength but full depth, that's a mobility exercise. So there's so much gray. It doesn't have to be black and white, this or that. But are we moving within our full range of motion? Are we slowing things down? Are we taking the time to be intentional of, if I'm trying to do an exercise that's targeting my glutes, do I feel my glutes? Like a lot of times I will do banded work. I remember working out with a friend and I'm like, oh, my glutes are on fire. And she's like, oh, my quads. And I'm like, okay, so we're not doing it, right?
Oh my gosh.
So if we're completely missing the intention of the exercise, well, then how do we take it back and how do we bring into that intention again? So, really getting clear on what I'm doing, what the intention is, and moving more with intention, I think should be the goal for everyone, which is hard. And that's where having a coach or following something becomes very important.
So we were talking about how I had a knee surgery. I actually had 3 within the same year, and I tore my ACL and my meniscus, full tear. And I still am having such massive issues and pain and tightness, and I'm still not 100%. And as a physical therapist for other people that have had an injury and it's taken a lot longer, I've given myself grace of, okay, I'm not 20, but I'm a healthy, active human. I am I doing something wrong? I've gone to a really good physical therapist in the beginning, but as you're talking about all of this and having body awareness and intention, I'm wondering if there's something that I'm missing that I could do because I'm not able to run yet, which is part of, yeah, that's like my
Her
meditation.
love.
And
Hmm.
my quad was atrophied for almost a year. So my doctor was like, gotta give
Hmm.
yourself grace, you gotta give yourself time. And I don't know, for someone like me, because I know I'm not the only one, it could be someone's elbow or shoulder, but in my case, the knee. I mean, what's your best advice?
So, I mean, there's so many different cases in terms of what exactly is needed for you, right? And that's where you've gone to physical therapy,
Yeah.
but physical therapy doesn't have to end there. You know, if you wanted to go back and see a physical therapist again and say, here's my goals, here's what I want to do, you can
Yeah.
also see what your insurance would pay for. Insurance nowadays should pay for physical therapy
Mhm.
without having to go
I
through a
know.
doctor.
It's about time.
At
Hallelujah.
yeah, exactly. Finally, with and sometimes that's limited in terms of how many visits you have available. But if you find someone good and they could just say, "Hey, touch in with me once every 2 weeks," that should be the goal. When you're already such an independent person, you're already working out, you're already doing your things. If you just touched in with someone
Mhm.
once every 2 weeks, once every 4 weeks, at a point, that's where it becomes really important to understand and identify. Okay, here's where your weaknesses are, because is it that you know we want to work the muscle in a way where it's not just in an end range of motion, it's not just doing quad sets anymore, but we're really working the muscle in its
Mm.
full range that it has available. So where are we putting it in an optimal position to feel supported by the body in order to do that? Are we pushing it too hard where now it's guarding and it's not going to go into the full range? So we need to set it up in a different position for the body in order for the knee to feel like it has a little bit more range. So how can we set the body up to take pressure off but still get a bigger range where it's being worked?
Yeah.
And it's so hard to say in general and give like, oh, here's exactly what you should do. But this is where it becomes really important of, are we working
Mhm.
all aspects that support the knee, from the front of the shin to the calf to the hamstring, the inner thigh, and the quad? How are we really working the exercises to balance all of those out? How are we working to push into the knee in a range that it feels comfortable with, in
Mhm.
which it's still being pushed to its end range, but not in a way that it's pushing back against you? So how can I take pressure off, where I'm not, maybe not doing a full body squat, but maybe I am supported by a TRX, or I'm supported by the hack squat, or I'm supported by something that allows me to get a bit more depth with a little less pressure. So we have to, start to identify that, slowing things down, working under smaller loads, but greater tension because I'm slowing it down. So we can still get an exercise to have a lot of load on our body just by slowing it down or taking pauses, not
Mhm.
necessarily by adding a ton of weight to it. So it just depends on what we kind of, where
Mhm.
we're missing, where we're weaker, where we need to strengthen, and then how do we start to work back into dynamic exercise? What needs to be supported? Is it the foot and ankle complex that needs to be a little bit more supported to help feel a little bit more confident and more dynamic type movement in order to get you
Yeah.
back into running again? Or is it the hip that needs a little bit more pressure and power in order to start getting you back into running? So we have to, again, having a
Yeah.
physical therapist kind of suss this out of like, okay, what's not working well and where do we need to put a little bit more attention, can be so helpful, because otherwise we're kind of just putting our head into a wall of like, I'm doing exercise, I'm trying to get
Totally.
stronger,
That's
but
such good
something's not
advice and
working.
helpful information. I also probably just need to get on and be a member and sign up for the knee and the hips and all of the things, because there
Yeah.
is like a methodology to all of it. And yeah, to the normal person, it can be overwhelming and you don't want to give up on your body. I do love that your messaging is like, your body is perfect and will do what you want it to do. You didn't come out with this issue, so you can get back to that place because it's empowering. It's good to have like that positive mindset.
I hope so.
I feel like.
Yeah. It's what's just stuck out to me that you said, and I'm sensitive to your time, so we're gonna wrap up here. But I love that you talked about the importance of the stabilizer muscles too. And not only like that's part of mobility too. Like you can't just work the prime movers, which for people listening, that's your larger muscle groups that everyone wants to strengthen or that you can see. But those stabilizers are just as important. And these issues creep up when we are unbalanced, either in strength, weak in an area. All of those require all of the love, especially as we get older, because then these things just kind of trickle in all the time. And people are like, well, I'm
I
just
hate
old.
that
And I'm like,
saying,
well,
by
you
the
don't
way.
have
I
to
do
be,
not like when people
you
say
know?
that. It's not the case.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, Jen, how can people find you? Doc Jen Fit on Instagram, but how can they find your membership and, your website and all of that good stuff?
Yeah, it's just jen.health. No .com, no anything else, just jen.health. We have our podcasts and blogs on there as well. That's where you can sign up. You can explore a week free of the membership and just see, if you vibe with it and how you're feeling with it. I recommend trying it. Don't just sign up and then don't do anything. Try the plans for a few days and actually see what it could feel like within your body. Because when we start to add in little things, it's just little bits at a time that can make a huge difference. And then the Optimal Body podcast, wherever you like listening to podcasts, my husband and I every other week go over one of, a major part of a diagnosis or a pain point that a lot of people are having. Since we're both PTs, we suss out, the latest research and what exercises are recommended, when we recommend seeing a PT, when surgery is kind of recommended. We go through a lot of myths that people believe to be true based on what they've been told and what is just not true based on the research we have today. So we go through a ton of diagnoses on the podcast. So I
know.
recommend that one.
I am
Oh,
like,
I can't wait to dive
and
in
if you're like
to
me
all
and
the
you
rest of
can't
them.
touch your toes, there's hope. And she also has videos on her YouTube channel that are
Yes.
giving you tips on how to be
Yes.
able to touch your toes again. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, quick tips to unlock that nervous system and get you bending forward.
So fun. Well, a dynamic duo. So thank you so much, Jen, and all the best to you. We will definitely be in touch and forward this information to our listeners. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and sharing the Body Pod with your friends.
Until next time.